Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learning Live. We have Crafty Kris back in the house, and she is going to be taking her Distress ink versus Distress Oxide to the next stage and sharing with you some really great crafty things, and I think you're going to be really inspired. So I'm just going to stop talking and turn things over to Kris, and away you go with Tuesday, November the 7th, Learning Live. All yours, Kris.
Thanks, Sherry. Okay, so tonight I'm going to show you a fun card that it's not my own design. I found it on Pinterest or YouTube or somewhere out there anyway. But it was a great jumping off point to give you more information and more experience looking at the differences between the ink and the oxide distress line. I pulled out some colors out of my die sets, and this is how I store my mini dies, or inks rather. And this I've since I spoke to you, I've never been really an oxide user, but I have now got my own collection starting, and I've chosen some colors out of my collection in I can't remember the name of the bag. Maybe Sherry can put that up for me. So what I've done, just to show you how I handle the oxides, is each compartment has enough room for 6 actual full-sized oxide inks. So I just put my daubers in the extra space that's in there. And so everything is stored according to the selection of things that are in there, and I can pull them out and use whatever I want from that selection. So just to let you know, for tonight's demonstration and discussion, I'm using a fair number of different colored inks because I'm doing a similar technique to the rainbow card that I did many, many moons ago. A slightly different version, but kind of the same. And I've just pulled up the inks here so you can see them. There's Chip Sapphire, Salty Ocean, Pine Needles, Mowed Lawn, Twisted Citron, Prize Ribbon, Weathered Wood, Wild Honey, Stormy Sky, Mustard Seed, Uncharted Mariner, and Rusty Hinge. So those are my oxides. In my ink selection, I've got the exact same things, but because I don't use the full-size ink pads, I'm showing you it with the minis. And I've borrowed Sherry's Uncharted Mariner because, of course, the 4-pack hasn't got its 4th color yet for us to get our Uncharted Mariner in a mini. So I'm just, let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to do a couple of quick this versus that situations. And I was playing around with not only the substrates, but both sides of the substrates. So on this example card, I have this on the back side of the leather, the Tim Holtz leather paper. So it still has a little bit of a texture. You can see it coming through the ink a bit. And on this as well, I have used some glaze to pull out a pattern from a stencil, which I'll show you how to do. And so this is, whoops. Uh-oh. Okay. I don't know how I got two the same. Okay. Anyway, I was intending to, oh, there we go. I don't know where that came from. Okay, so this one is now using the actual pattern side, and these are oxides. I've done the exact same treatment, just different colorways, and you can see the texture in the background like this. But depending on whether you use the really patterny side or the less patterny side, you get two totally different looks. In this set, I am totally messed up here. Okay. Sorry. No, that's this. And that's this. I've mixed up my oxides and my inks. Okay, so again, I have a different colorway here. I've got the wood grain paper, and you can see the wood grain very clearly. I tried to put the pattern on this, and I'll explain to you the different ways I added the pattern. This one I used Duraclear gloss and tried to get the pattern on there. And oh my goodness, my samples are all messed up. Oh no, here we go. That's why, because I'm taking from two different piles. Nope, there we go. Good. Okay. So that we already did. Right. Okay, so this is the wood grain pattern. You get the pattern of wood grain in, let me just turn this down a little bit, in both ways of working with the paper, whether it's front or back. It's more obvious when it's on the front side than on the back side, but there is grain there. I can't seem to pull it up with the lighting. No. Anyway, I tried to also use on this one Duraclear gloss. It worked very well on the flatter side, but the grainier side, of course, the pattern kind of got lost. Okay.
Kris, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
You tend to be going a little bit off the top of your camera, so if you can come down just a little bit, then everybody
Oh,
can see.
like
That's
here?
much better. Yeah, here's
Okay.
perfect. Thank you.
When I'm trying to show examples, I try to bring it close, but I will do that when I do that.
Thank
Okay, so
you.
thanks. So this is watercolor paper, and there is a smooth side and a textured side, and you do get a textury look on the textured side and not so much um, on the smooth side. And this one I textured using water pouncing. So just on a dauber, I used water and I pounced to give it a little bit of texture, not necessarily an actual pattern. And I also tried it on canvas paper, and canvas paper has a very canvassy side and a smooth side as well. And it is pre-gessoed, and you can see the difference in texture right off the bat. This looks like denim, and this looks like your regular inks would look. I did, what did I do on this? I did glaze on this. It did not show up very well on the side of the very textured side, and it did not show up well on the back of this uh, canvas paper. Sorry, lost my words. So it is there, but it spread a little bit. So that was all the inks, and the oxides had similar results. I'm not going to go through each and every one. What I did like about the oxides, if you compare the two apples to apples, the oxides versus the inks on a textured paper were still very vibrant. The oxides tended to mellow out a little bit. The dark colors especially. So this is coming across as a purple, and it's actually like a chip, like a sapphire blue on this side. So that was what I found the difference between the oxides and the inks, and that is no surprise to us because we discussed that before. What else was really cool? It didn't take the water the same way I had intended it to take it. So if I look back on what I did, the pouncing I did on this paper, I like the textury pouncing. Oh, that's not the pouncing. There it is. So I like the textury, I like the textury pouncing I've got on this side. It's very light, but as soon as the water hit, I didn't really get much of a chance to move it around or lighten it up in any shape or form on the oxide. So the oxide reacted super fast whereas the ink itself allowed it to sort of morph and play around. So that was a surprise. And I've got to say that I really like the way the canvas looks, the back of the canvas looks in the Oxide. It's really, it almost looks like it's printed. It's so clearly defined. Whereas I found on, and it has a pattern on it. I put a pattern on, same as this one. But again, this chipped sapphire is going purple on the white background. So the doubling of white seems to, because we know there's a white base in that Oxide, when you put it on white paper, it tends to make it even more pastel-y. So that was interesting to note. All right, so a couple of things. When you're doing this technique, I'm just going to do it on, I think this is Tim Holtz heavyweight cardstock. And I'm going to do it horizontal. You can do it horizontal or vertical. Oh, I should show you this before we move on to the actual technique. So I did also play with it on craft, and you can, you know, right away that the craft, sort of get this in the same direction. The craft absorbs water. But what I found with the craft and the black, these two are Oxide and this one is ink. The ink absorbed right into the paper and was able to hold its color a little bit better than the Oxide. The Oxide, the colors, there was very little definition, where I'm getting more definition with the ink. The other thing is, because the ink absorbs quickly into the porous craft, the Oxides didn't. And so they tended to sit on top, which really affected the process of making these cards, because one of the things you have to do is move from color to color to color using tape to cover the previous color so you don't get it messed up with your next color. But because the ink sat more on top of these paper, being an Oxide, I had to actually physically dry it with the my dryer, and even then you can see where it got pulled off in places because it still was not dry. So that made it kind of tricky. So my suggestion is, if you're going to do this technique, use watercolor paper, a nice weight of watercolor paper if you're doing Oxides, because it will help to pull it into the background. I would stay away from smooth surfaces and go to something that's a little tackier, because between the two, smooth surface and absorbing surface, I've got much better lineage and much better coverage here with the Oxide than I got on the smooth surface with the Oxide. So that's two things that are interesting to note. But to be honest, I really like it with the ink. All right, on to the
Kris,
technique. Yes.
before you go on, Kris or Margaret was just wondering if it is regular craft or heavyweight craft that
This
you
is
used
the
in those samples.
So this is the Tim Holtz craft, and I think it is a heavyweight craft.
The heavy stock.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right. So first things first, you have to have some really light tack tape, because you do not want to rip your surface and you do not want to pull your paint off. And you want to make sure that your two pieces you're going to start with are exactly maybe half an inch or more beyond the diagonal, the longest diagonal. So whether you're going up and down this way, it has to still be beyond that diagonal. And the only thing you need to know in advance is what sentiment you're planning on. So if you look at my original, I had planned on a nice little sentiment that's stuck in the corner, and that's how I thought these cards best worked. I tried it with a couple of other options, and I even tried covering the whole piece, which was okay, but then you have to actually mount your sentiment on top of that. So this was just a quick and easy way to get a card that looked pretty dynamic out the door without too much work. So The first thing I'm going to do is mark off my bottom. Now this is the bottom edge of my first arrow, I guess, for lack of a better word. So I want to make sure that the bottom of my first color is about 1.5 inches from the top and about 2 inches from the bottom, so I have enough room for this sentiment. So whether it's exact or not, it doesn't really matter. I'm off, but it's about that space between the two sides. I can still get my sentiment in there very nicely. Then you have to have a second piece that is the same length. And this is the piece that you're going to manipulate. So this is the bottom of your first color. And we want our first color to start off with the arrow point at the bottom. And I'm not going to go right over to the top edge yet. I'm going to fill in the space on this side with that color. Now I'm going to do ink right now. And the colors I want to use are the ones in the sample. And that was Rusty Hinge, Mustard Seed, Wild Honey, Withered Wood, Stormy Sky, and Uncharted Mariner. Now the other ones were for the green and blue. So we have green and blue, which is not complementary, and analogous colors on the color wheel. That means they sit side by side. And then the orangey yellowies with the blue is what we call contrasting or complementary, where they're on the opposite sides of the color wheel. So I am going to start off with, let's start off with Stormy Sky. I usually keep my daubers in the inside of my little container, and they fit perfectly in that 8-tray Totally Tiffany container. And this is the only time it doesn't matter when you're blending if you get lines and things, because you're going for the most color you can get. So even if you start off and you have lines like this, you're just going to keep blending and adding color. And when you get down here, you have to start working the side of the dauber, because you don't want to get here or on the next color area. So you're just going to keep popping in and just build that color. And I'm shaking you, I think. Sorry. This is a heavy duty job. But you can see my color is building nicely. And I'm not necessarily going around in circles. I'm just filling it in. I'm not trying to blend a beautiful background. I'm just trying to get this whole thing covered as quickly as possible. Now, I did an experiment, and I did 4 cards at one time. And it works. You can do like a mass production of this card because it's so simple. Okay, whoop, maybe a little more there. There we go. Okay, pop the lid back on that. I'm going to keep my foam out because I will go back to that color later. My next color is Uncharted Mariner. And I'm showing both. I have flat heads, which work really well with the minis. And this is Sherry's Uncharted Mariner in ink. And so I happen to have a round one. It doesn't really matter. Now, before we get to that, here's the maintenance part. So I am going to pull this off, and you can see that I've got a line there. It's very faint, but it is there. This is where you take a super clean part of a baby wipe, and because it's just been put down, you can erase it for the most part. Wasn't very careful. Alrighty. Now, I took that tape off. I need to wipe that tape down. And I'm going to be doing the same with the second one. Make sure you don't rip the tip. I'm going to, oops, you don't want that to happen if you can avoid it. And I'm going to wipe the tape down. The reason I'm wiping the tape is because I don't want that color to mix in with the next color when I put my next color on. So I've got the tip down on the first one. I'm now going to put the tip up on the second one. And let's see, I'm going to go right to the corner here. Okay, and because I have no ink there, I'm not worried about spreading it. Now, I'm going to show this to you. When you cover your color, you have to make sure you leave a tiny little bit exposed. So if you can see the tiny little bit, ooh, can't even see it. There's a tiny little bit exposed of the undercolor. And the reason is because if you don't overlap the color slightly, you'll get a white line. And that white line is hard to get rid of because you've got to play around with your tape to make sure you're not going to damage your color, but you're going to be able to go back in and ink to get them to merge together. So you don't want to have that problem. So the first thing you're going to do when you put this tape down is leave a smidgy, like a 32nd of an inch exposed. Okay, I'm going in with my mariner. And again, I don't care. Look at, see how dark I am there? Oh no, that would be a problem if I was trying to blend nicely. But I just want everything to be absolutely dark. So I'm just going to keep going in until that color builds nicely. And the nice thing about round daubers is that you can just keep going back over and over and fill in that color. Oops. Now, I didn't go to a point there. That's not good. You want to have a point there. So I did not give you a very good example. Okay, that looks nice and dark. And I'm going to keep my dauber here because I know I'm going to use it again. Then, same strategy we did before. See how when I pull this off now, let me just wipe it before I bring it up to the camera. There we go. You cannot see a white line between those two things, and that's because I overlapped them. So you have to do that each and every time to make sure you don't run into any white lines. And just tidy up after each time you put a color on. So that was supposed to be a point, but I didn't do a good job. So now our point is going to go down here, and I'm going to do a better job. There we go. And I'm going maybe about an inch over. And now I take my other one that I wiped off, and I'm going to leave that little smidgy bitchy bit. Woo, that was almost a swear word. I'm sorry. There we go. And sometimes they get a little bit along the edge because you're wiping them all the time. They lift a little. You can still use it as long as you're careful and you don't go back on the tape and get the ink underneath the tape. As long as you're going in that direction, away from the floppy edge, you should be good. All right, I'm going to go to Rusty Hinge. I love this color. And again, when you're up at the top, you're just going to use the side of your dauber. Get that color nice and thick and deep. Okay. There we go. Pull that off. And because I had that crossover, I don't have any white there. There we go. Just make sure there's nothing else. And now I'm going to go across here. Make sure I have a smidge of the other color showing again. And point is down here, so now I'm going to make my point up here. And let's do about that much. Actually, I'm going to do it a little wider because the next one is yellow and we want to have your eye go right there. Okay, so that goes there. Oops, that does not want to stay there. Mustard seed is our next color. Make sure everything's down nicely. And this is where the crickets go, or while you're waiting for me to finish doing this. I'm sure you get the idea of how quickly this can go. You just want to have nice, even color as much as you can, but nice and, what's the word? Saturated, that's the word. Okay. Pulling. And you'll notice that your tape starts to lose its stickiness. And once it gets too iffy, like you're really afraid that you might run into trouble, then you need to stop using it and get a fresh piece. Now this is going to be a little tricky. My tape is the same color as the mustard seed. Okay, point is here, so now I've got to go and make the point in the other direction. There we go. Make sure those lines are good. And wild honey is the next color. And I'm sure you all saw, well, I'm hoping you all saw my post in Papercrafters telling you that you do need to maintain your pads, and that always in the fall, it is my get the inking going, because usually I'm so busy using things during the year that I forget to maintain my pads. And if things are dry, I revive them with Reviver. And if they are wet but not getting great, whoops, I should go back here. Okay, we're going back to Rusty Hinge. Yeah, so if my pads are dry, like dry, I use, oh, Sherry, help me with this. Not a Reviver. It is the pad.
The re-inker?
Not the re-inker. This is when the re-inker, when it's so dry that a re-inker refresher. Thank you. Yes.
Too many re-words.
Yeah. So the refresher is what you need when they're seriously dry, and that'll help to revive them. You let it sit 24 hours in your pad, and then, okay, point there. So now the point is here. Then you add your re-inker. But you need to really make sure that the pad has been revived, and by reviving, it is moistening. So you really want to get the pad to be moistened, so you don't rush it. You don't put the Reviver on, or the whatever whatever the word was. I've forgotten it already. Hey. Yeah, you want to make sure that that pad is nice and damp when it takes the new round of refill. Okay, there we go. I think we are done with this, so I can just pop that off. And I'm going to take both these off. Look how beautiful that is. It's just so sunny. Okay. And you should, well, so as you know me, I don't like to spend money, but point is there, so now the point has to be here. You do use a fair amount of tape, and so I try to use my tape as long as I can. And as long as you're gentle and you're not scraping it against the edges, you should be able to do one card with one set of tape. And I am moving on to Stormy Sky. There we go. Back to Stormy Sky. And the yellow tape is perfect for this. Now, if you have paper that's a bit lighter than the heavy cardstock, you want to make sure you run that tape over your jeans or something just to take the first tack off. After that, it will get less tacky all on its own. But if you have the hard, smooth surface, Vicky Bouton or Tim Holtz, you don't have to worry about it as much. At least that's what I have found. All right.
Kris?
Yeah?
Margaret suggests just put the tape on your wish list and Santa will see it.
Absolutely. I think wish lists are brilliant. All right, so I'm done with the Stormy Sky, done with the Rusty Hinge. I'm going to use weathered wood. Now, weathered wood, I'm only putting one piece in of weathered wood. You can see it's a slight difference. And it's just to kind of draw the eye, and I like that it makes it not symmetrical, if you know what I mean. It's that one color that doesn't show up anywhere else. Everything else has got one or two times on the page, but this one just doesn't. And it's kind of like a surprise color. And whoops. All right. So once you've done this, point there, therefore the point has to be there. Okay, once you've done this 2 or 3 times, it becomes second nature. What was this? Weathered wood. Yes, that's what I want. And you find that you don't really have to think too much about it, other than making sure you don't go over your line and get ink somewhere, or you don't make a point where you're supposed to make a point. But as long as you've got that, the lines between each color touching or overlapping, you're laughing. And this weathered wood is such a light color. I really like to jam it in there. Okay, there we go. And that's all we needed that. And I think we will just finish off with Uncharted Mariner. And then I'm going to show you a couple of ways. Oh, somehow I got liquid on there. I'm going to show you a couple of ways to take it up a notch. You've already seen a couple of ways, actually, because you've seen my playing around with different ways to add texture that's like a clear sort of watermark texture. There we go. Lost my dauber. Okay. This Uncharted Mariner is a beautiful color. Alrighty. Let's get it off there. Now these tapes, to prevent you from using them too much, you should always get a fresh set for your next round of tapes. And I just fold them in half, because my husband has found that when I put tape in the garbage as is, and I don't roll it up in a nice little package, it sticks to everything. And then when he goes to throw out the empty the garbage, it's all stuck on the inside. So I try to be respectful of his wishes when I remember. Okay, so this is our basic card. And you can see how that gray is just that little bit of difference. I just like the way that balances. Now, let's take this up a notch. I'm not going to put a sentiment in there, because that will be something that you will decide on your own. But what I am going to do is add a texture in the background. So I could have done that by my choice of paper, obviously, and I can do that using stencils. So there's a bunch of different stencils. I like a small tight pattern versus an open pattern, because I feel like it gives a little more visibility. I'm going to use this one, which is our cubist one, I think it's called, from Crafter's Workshop. And I'm going to stick my card down just to hold it. Now, the stuff that I found is the best. I'm going to move this up a bit to make like that watermark look is the collage. Let me see if I'm right about that. Sorry, I've just thrown everything up here. So glaze and your choices will be dependent on your paper too. That's the one I like, and of course it's not marked. That one was gloss, so that was a little too liquidy. Collage, glaze, and this one was. You can see I played. I did a lot of playing. I can't find it. You know what? I'm going to use Distress Glaze, because I always talk about it, so I should be using it. And I'm just going to line up my sides here. So I just put one little piece on the bottom. There we go. And I normally, you can see the shape of my thing. It's from putting one of these guys on the end of there and sticking it inside. But to be quite honest, I get too much that way. So I'm just going to go inside and take a tiny little bit out and tamp it to the side, and I can pick that up again. Now remember, glaze does have solvent, so you want to cover it. And I'm just going to tap it in to begin with. We don't want to drag it when it's super thick, because if we drag it when it's super thick, we will find that it will glump up and be too thick. Oh, I still got a bit there. And I'm just going in and tapping it down. Need a tiny little bit more. And you need so little, like you can't even see how much I've put on there. Especially with a sponge, because the sponge will suck it up a bit. Just try to make sure you've got everywhere. And I'm going to use it all. And now I'm just going to go in and rub very lightly, just to make sure it's gone everywhere. Circles, squares, up, down, left, right. Just making sure. You don't want to force it underneath. You're just going lightly over the surface. Okay. Ooh, my fingers are covered in it. That's okay. All right. So you can start to see it. You should be able to see it at this point. Pull this out. Oops, gentle. So there's our texture. And you can see it, it glimmers a little bit. This is a matte finish. So right now it is still wet and has the solvent. So the solvent makes it kind of shiny. It will turn matte so that it looks like, where's my original one? It doesn't have a shine, it just shows you the pattern. So here there's no shine, it's just pattern. So eventually that shine will disappear. Now, if you want to keep that shine, you could do a little bit with the gloss varnish, and that will keep it looking shinier. And I can show you something that has gloss varnish on it in my pile of things. Is that it? Nope. There we go. So you can see that this is very shiny. It will end up like, oh, I just lost it. Goodness gracious. It will end up like this, not shiny. And then this is with the gloss, shiny. Okay, and that's on a textured background, so it's not showing as flat and shape-like. Okay, so, but it's there. And this one isn't shiny, and that one is shiny. All right.
Kris,
So
we have a question from Margaret.
Sure.
To put the gloss varnish on, do you have to dry the glaze?
You either do the gloss varnish or you do the glaze. The glaze, once it's sealed the surface, the gloss varnish will be repelled because it's a liquid. Remember, the gloss varnish makes it waterproof. So you have to choose one way or the other. If you want it matte, you use the gloss varnish. If you want it shiny, you use, the Distress Glaze if you want it matte. If you want it shiny, you use a Duragloss gloss varnish. Okay, you can't use them both because this will repel this. Does that make sense?
You.
Okay. All right, so that's going to dry. You can already see that it's starting to get more matte. Okay, so that's one way to up the ante on your card. The second way to up the ante was to actually choose some kind of a texture, as well as maybe decorating with the boxes. The third way is to add a little bit of bling. And we like our bling at Papercrafter's Workshop. So I'm going to take about 1/8 of an inch piece, and I'm just going to trim it down here. And I'm going to grab my glue. And I'm going to add some glue to the back. Actually, I'm going to add the glue right along the line here. Just a little tiny bit. And put that along the bottom. I'm going to do another one of that so you can see it with the text on it. Get that one out. This one I cut a little thinner. It's up to you how thin, how thick. I love this precision tip. This is great glue. I'm playing with it the last couple of days, and I like it. Okay, and then we grab some scissors. Let me just snip the excess off. There's one. I'll pull it up to the camera for you. So there you go. Just a little bit of bling. How can you say no to bling? So there's the two of them. And that's it. Any questions? Concerns? Comments?
I think all the questions have been answered so far.
Okay.
Maybe can you pull down one that you used Oxide for, just so people again
Sure.
can see the comparison?
Absolutely, I can. I just got to find them. I should find a flat one. That would work better. In the same colors. Sorry, I got them all piled up here. So this is an Oxide with the texture that is the wood paneling. And that's ink. This is an Oxide that I did using the water technique. And I have to say, I do like the way the Oxide spreads. I just feel, I feel like the colors are more vivid in the inks. You get that pastel-y look with the, have I got them in the same order? There we go. Do you see how the inks are sort of a different tone altogether? One is very pastel-y, which makes them better for dark surfaces. But I just feel like, let me show you. And smooth surfaces, actually. Now, this is Oxide versus ink, and this was better than this. Now, there was a blemish on the back. This is the back of the, and there was some kind of a blemish there. It did not want to take the ink. But if you look everywhere else, you can see that the Oxide is, they're not in the same order, but the Oxide is a smoother look on this one than the ink is on that texture. So basically, these two are ink and these two are Oxide.
I think it just goes to show that no matter what you have in your collection, there are some beautiful things you can create.
Yep. And this is ink and that's Oxide. You know, in some cases, it makes absolutely no difference. These are both on the same paper. This has very little difference, except that this is a little more purple, but that's because the blue has got some white in it and it pulls out that purpley blue. But the texture that I put on using collage paste, so this medium, collage medium, even turned out better on the oxide than it did on the ink. It disappeared on the ink. So you really do have to play to get the scent and get the look you want. You know, if you're happy with this look, then this is the way to go. But if you like to maybe have the oxides with some texture, the oxides react the same way as the ink does. For instance, this being, I just did that with glaze, and this is also glaze. The glaze acts the same way on the oxide as it does, except that if you rub it, it pulls the ink out of it and it becomes whiter. So you end up getting a white effect versus, so you can see that it's whitening versus darkening. So it's darkening on the ink, but lightening on the oxide. I just found that fascinating.
I think you've also shown the importance of, if you are playing, write notes on the back.
Oh, yeah.
So that you remember what you did.
Yeah, for sure. And in this card, I've done, well, you've seen all of the ones I've done so far, not finished with my investigations by any stretch of the imagination, but every one of these looks different. Even though they may even have the same colors in the same order, they look different just based on the texture of the paper, the color of the paper, what you use to put the texture on with the stencil, you know, what color you use for your glitter. Like, there's just so many options.
So many options.
Yeah.
Debbie is asking if you can please go over the color palette again for the blue and green ones that you did. I see them off to the side, but it's hard to read.
Absolutely. So in this color palette, I have Chipped Sapphire, Salty Ocean, Pine Needles, Mowed Lawn, Twisted Citron, and Prize Ribbon. In the one we were working on, I have Weathered Wood, Wild Honey, Stormy Sky, Mustard Seed, Uncharted Mariner, and Rusty Hinge. And like I said, these palettes are, one is what we call complementary, so it's opposites, and one is analogous, which is side by side on the color wheel.
Thank you, Kris.
You're welcome. I hope everybody enjoyed that and learned something new. I'm not done with oxides versus inks. I think there might be another one.
There just might be a part 3.
Yeah.
Or 4 or 5. Who knows? Who knows what 2024 will bring?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kris. Those are fantastic cards. I think you showed really easy techniques. We often get people looking for masculine cards, and I think the examples and the color combinations you've shown make it perfect for that kind of situation. But you could always do girly ones too, so it's not limited to that. So
absolutely. And I love this denim one. Just because it's faded, it looks very cool. Sorry.
And nobody will see them side by side, so they won't know that one is different than the others. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in tonight. And we would love to see your creation. So if you give these techniques a try, if you give these color combinations or your own color combinations a try, please do put them in the Papercrafts Inner Circle. And we look forward to seeing what you make. Now, as far as what's happening the rest of the week, you guys know our special guest is joining us for a special announcement tomorrow night on Learning Live at 7 p.m. Tiffany is very excited to be joining us at 7 o'clock Eastern, and we've got some brand new products to share. We are the first store in Canada, and so that makes it super, super exciting. If you are local to us and you want to join us for our demo days on Saturday, the holiday edition, that is from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. Otherwise, have a very crafty week, and we will see you all soon. Have a good night, everyone.